Hi guys, how are we doing? Welcome to another episode of CryptoinsightUK's podcast. Today we are joined by Layah Heilpern. What we're going to do to start with is just ask Layah to introduce herself a little bit for you guys who don't know her, so take it away.
Thanks so much for having me on. So yeah, you got it right. It's Layah Heilpern, pronounced perfectly. So I am the author of Undressing Bitcoin. I'm producing a lot of crypto content, educational content. I do news shows, I host shows. I work with loads of different amazing companies in the space. I try and educate as many people as possible. And yeah, just really kind of advocate for Bitcoin and freedom and taking personal responsibility.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for joining me on my show. Glad I got your name right. And let's jump into the main thing. So, Layah, what did you do before you got into cryptocurrency, and how did you first get into crypto?
Great question. Okay, how did I get in? Wait, what did I do before? That was the question. So I am a journalist by certificate. I have an undergrad degree in broadcast journalism, so I'm a trained journalist. I used to work for a London news station called London Live. They're kind of like a branch off the Evening Standard, which if you're British, everyone British will know the Evening Standard, or London-based even. And yeah, so I'm a journalist by trade, and I've also worked for the Chinese. So I worked for China's global TV network, and I was based in Paris. So I was like a correspondent. We'd cover, like finance, business, terrorism, trade wars, explosions, and all that stuff. So that was in Paris. I also actually flew to Barcelona to cover the riots when between I think it was the whole Catalonian issue and they want to become like sovereign or whatever. So I was in the riots for that. So like a proper journalist there where it's all going down. But basically, how did I get into crypto? Well, I initially didn't get the job that I wanted, right? So like I was working as a behind the screens journalist, and I always wanted to be in front of the screen, interviewing people, talking to people. Like I love to speak, so I was annoyed that I couldn't be in front of camera. And I said to my boss at the time, his name was Jim, and I was like, Jim, I'm going to be a front of camera journalist. Like either you help me get there, like, do you want to help me get there and give me the promotion or not? Like, it's happening, Jim. And he was like, I'll get back to you in 2 months. So obviously he didn't give me the promotion. It was like politics and stuff like that. So I saw a job offered in Malta, and it was to be a journalist and cover blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And so I took the job. I didn't know anything at the time. And what I liked about it was, so it was high paying for my age, right, at the time. And what was really interesting was living in Malta and doing a job in crypto. I realized like how much money there is to be made in this world, because journalism is like teaching and being like working for the NHS and all that stuff, like care workers. That aside, journalism is actually one of the lowest paying industries for how much stress it gives. Unless you work for the BBC, that's different. But journalism in general is one of the lowest paying industries. And so I always had this mentality that like in order to survive in life, you had to be out the door before the sun rises in the morning, and you had to be home after it sets. So you never see the light of day. And living in Malta, I realized that that's not true. Like there's a lot of money to be made. There's so much money on that island. And when you work for a news station, which is funded by crypto people, you realize, wow, like there's so much money to be made. And I definitely don't want to go back to doing what I was doing. So that was kind of my entry into the space, and I learned a lot about it. And I'm sure we'll get to this, but like in terms of falling in love with it, that comes from a political standpoint of like freedom, sovereignty, and not just like owning your own assets, but owning your own time and your own everything. So it's kind of like the brief overview.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. I think that like it's something that a lot of people who I've spoken to share that same sort of vision of like we want to own our own self, basically time, money, like what we do with that time as well. Like it's a very interesting world, and I feel like there's always like the same sort of message from people who I speak to in the crypto scene, and it's normally around mental health is one, and the other one is freedom. So those two things Although I do feel like I probably do more hours now than I ever would at a nine
Yes,
to five job, but I love it,
same.
so it's all right. So we've spoken a bit off camera, and you said that you were actually in the UK. So I don't know if this question really applies that well, but what is going on with you and Miami? I saw you were over there. Do you have any residency there? What's happening there?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in London right now. I'm back home with my lovely parents. And no, I was in Miami for 3 months. And I'm actually in the middle of moving there permanently. So I actually submitted my visa recently. So I'm waiting to get an interview date. That's where I'm up to. But I'm actually going to be going, even before I officially move, I'm going to be going back for a few months, I think around April for the conference and just to hang out there because I just prefer it. And then I'll come back for an interview and then fly back and move. So it's a bit back and forwards, but I don't mind. I don't mind. It's good. It's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And going into that a little bit more, what is it like living in Miami in regards to cryptocurrency? I know that they're quite like a crypto-friendly city specifically. They released their Miami coin. Is there any specific provisions there that are different to what we get here in the UK?
It's not so much like provisions or regulations or things like that. It's more of just a spirit. And that's what I really appreciate. It's just, so firstly, I know lockdowns and stuff like that are lifting, but like there are no vaccine mandates. I know we obviously don't have that in the UK either, thank God. But you know, there's just like this freedom spirit, right? And this entrepreneurial spirit, and nobody's afraid to make more money. Like in England, I often find that there's, you know, don't be too loud, don't make too much money. And like, even if you are super successful, you're supposed to like self-deprecate while doing that. And you're supposed to like apologize. Whereas like you can be unapologetically successful. You can be unapologetically innovative. And you only have to look at the difference between the mayor of London and the mayor of Miami. The mayor of London, unfortunately, bangs on about feminism, masks, body positivity, and stuff which is really just negative and irrelevant. Whereas the mayor of Miami has just raised a lot of money with Miami Coin. They're now using that money, I just read today, to help with the rent prices, because the prices have just gone sky high. It's absolutely insane, the prices of rent and property in Miami right now. But you know, he's putting back into the economy. He's innovating. They managed to make some money, and now they're putting it back into the community. What are we doing in London? Well, we have the mayor of London is when Trump was in power, he was you know, criticizing Trump, and at that protest with the big blow up blimp, if you remember that. He's taking down pictures of women in bikinis on the London Underground because apparently that's offensive. I mean, it's pathetic, right? So like, I just want to be around people who are innovating, people who aren't offended every second, people who are unapologetic about being successful and wanting to make more. And people are very much like that, and it's actually so incredible. It's refreshing. And in terms of like it being this crypto city, you literally have ads everywhere about crypto. Like, it's nuts. They have like a little they have something called the Metro Mover. So the Metro Mover is like this free train which takes you around Miami. And you have like NFTs being advertised on the Metro Mover. You have like crypto.com huge banners. I think I saw like an advert about Shiba Inu and like Doge. Like, it's just wild. It's like the Metaverse. Do you know what I mean? Whereas like London, like I said, I don't want to like, I feel really always like really bad when I say bad things about London, but like, we just really lack any innovation and excitement. And I saw Matt Hancock, who was the previous health secretary, I saw him talking about CBDCs, and it's just like, sit down. Like, no, you're lying. Like you don't care about it being innovative. You literally lied to the whole country during lockdown. You cheated on your wife, slept with somebody else while we were all supposed to be on a lockdown. So like, I don't trust these people to start like innovating and being, you know, he's so at the forefront of innovation, please. Like, I don't believe it.
Yeah, and I think that the way that I'd like to sum that up is that the thought process that I have is why I don't want to be here long term. Like, again, we talked about off camera, is I think that we're quite like we're kind of like regressing, and we're not. And I want to be somewhere that's like progressive. And yeah, I wouldn't like to have my kids one day like raise them here, because I think we're coming down and like other places are going upwards. So let's get in a little bit to like the economy. specifically in the US. We know that inflation has just printed like a 40-year high at 7.5% for the CPI. What does this mean for the general public, and how does it affect them?
I mean, it's very simple, isn't it? Prices go up. And I think what's really sad about it is that people don't know about inflation. I mean, even I know we want to talk about the US, but like even in the UK, like I remember I was speaking to some of my friends and I was explaining inflation to them. They just didn't care. And it's because the money isn't literally taken from you. It's devalued without you even realizing it. And of course, you know, the price of the level of inflation is not quite what the CPI says. It's definitely not 7%. It's more than 7%. So for your viewers, if they don't know how it works, CPI is the Consumer Price Index. So essentially what they do is they take a basket of random goods, right? So you have a basket, they'll throw in bread, milk, cheese, whatever. And then they'll compare that to how it was the previous year. And you can obviously measure the price and the inflation rate. Problem is that basket of goods is selected. So it's really what they choose to put in it. And I remember at the time where the Fed was talking about inflation being transitory, they were trying to convince us by, and I think it was Joe Biden actually, he came out saying something like, oh, you know, when they measure inflation, they don't include certain like meats, and certain chicken and certain things like that, because like for some dumb reason. And we're just like, no, you need to include that in the Consumer Price Index so we get the real level of inflation. But they don't, and they admitted not to include it to including certain things. I mean, you need to look at the situation in the UK. I believe fuel was up in the summer around 20%, and our CPI is supposed to be about to hit 7.25% as of April. That's the latest prediction from the Bank of England. So, I mean, if fuel's up 20%, CPI is 7%, it's just not true.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, does it? And like as you said, everything that we consume should be included in the Consumer Price Index. So in regards to that, how does this and what does this do in terms of Bitcoin? Like, how does that affect us as the general public again?
I mean, I think that it really shows the importance of Bitcoin, right, in terms of being that hedge against inflation. But it's difficult because people don't necessarily know that. And I don't really think inflation is what brings people into the community. I think it's what makes people stay. So it's like NFTs, for example. I think that is huge. And I think that's what allowed our community to really reach the mainstream. And then it's understanding, you know, once they like NFTs and they're good with it, they can start understanding other things like Bitcoin. And then that's what makes them stay. And that's the most important thing. But unfortunately, the education isn't strong enough about inflation. So people don't understand. And then especially like Bitcoin aside, you know, how do we hedge against that? Well, they don't know. Like I wouldn't know. So I don't know how old you are. I imagine we're probably in a similar age range.
I'm 28.
Okay, wow. Okay, so I'm younger than you. I thought, yeah, okay, I'm younger than you. You look super young.
Baby face.
You do. I thought you were like 23 or something. You look much younger. Yeah, so like we never learned in school about how to hedge against inflation. There was no financial literacy. The stock market was certainly not taught to us. I don't know how to trade. So everything that I know about money and investing and things like that, I learned through Bitcoin. So that means that if people don't have, you know, in our generation and Gen Z, if they don't have access to this kind of information, then what are they going to do? How are they going to get involved? They're just not. Their money's going to inflate away.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting. I think even like I don't think it's just our generation either. I think even older generations. So like use my mum for example, who's coming up to retirement age, and she's obviously got like a lump sum of cash. And I just say to her, look, with 5%, it was 5.8 last time we said, and you're saying 7.25. I think in April inflation rates. I said, mum, look. It's not about like gambling your portfolio. It's just about having a bit of asset allocation to try and hedge against this, to try and save your wealth about longer term, because we don't really know what's going to happen. But eventually she has actually invested into crypto. But as I said, like guys, none of this is financial advice. It's just our opinion on and our take on the market. So the way to deal with inflation, what is the Fed trying to do, and do you think it's effective? We know, for example, that they've said there was going to be 3 interest rate hikes this year, definitely. But do you think they'll even follow through with that? And how does this work? How does it affect our economy?
Okay, so they want to start tapering quantitative easing, right? So the main reason behind inflation is because they print money. They print money to stimulate the economy because we're in the middle of a crisis like a pandemic. So they print more money. We don't really feel the effects until the economy starts to open and money starts to trade hands. The problem with that, just for more context, is that the rest of the country doesn't really get to see the money that's printed. Those who print it get to see the money. So it kind of like props the stock market up on stilts. If people cast their mind back to March 2020, which is, wow, 2 years ago now. Jesus Christ, that's mental. Why does time go so fast? 2 years ago, then, the stock market absolutely crashed. You print more money and you basically put it up on stilts. So they want to start tapering that. Okay, so not as much printing. And then, of course, they increase interest rates. The thing with that is, it's funny because when they said that they were increasing interest rates, the price of Bitcoin sort of went down. And it was like really weird because then it's like, hang on, if inflation is going to slow down, then people aren't buying Bitcoin. So we're like, what is happening here? But then there's been some confusion anyway, and they're not. We don't really know to what level they're going to be increasing these interest rates. So now Bitcoin's going up. So whatever happens, Bitcoin does its own thing. I know that it is somewhat a correlated asset, but I don't think it's that correlated. Whether they will be increasing those interest rates, I definitely think they will, because inflation keeps booming, and you also have like the midterm elections coming up, and what was happening with the economy right now and just geopolitics is an absolute shambles. So I think that they do need to do something. Whether that something will be effective, or that's a different conversation, because no, I don't think it'll be effective.
Yeah, and like, in all fairness, they are between a rock and a hard place from my understanding anyway. Like, if they increase interest rates, like we saw that even them talking about it scared the stock market, brings the asset prices down. If they push the interest rates too hard, then we might see like a depression because of asset prices collapsing. But if they then don't, then we just see increased inflation. So we are in this like mid section all the time. So if the Fed do introduce like that, they go through with their 3 interest rate hikes, what would you expect to see like from like a reaction to the market? Like, what would you expect to see there? Or do you think that will even affect the market, as you were saying, like Bitcoin's its own beast at the minute? What do you think will happen there?
I think short-term effects, right? Like increased interest rates. We saw the price of Bitcoin go down. Now the price of Bitcoin is back up. I don't think it's going to affect it that much. It's kind of, it reminds me of March 2020, where of course the stock market crashed. Bitcoin then went down to like 3 or 4K for like a minute. And then it found its own feet, its own beast, and it kind of shot just up. So I think that it's its own thing. I really do. I think short term it really is a correlated asset. It is. Long term, it's just not. And then we also have to consider like how long is this so-called economic recovery going to take, right? Because like the Bitcoin halving is what now, like another 2 years away or something. So it's like we're getting closer to another cycle.
Yeah,
so,
it's a weird one.
Yeah, so like that's gonna impact it.
Yeah,
it's gonna impact it. So.
I've been having like a bit of a thought recently. Is like maybe this is the bear market. Like maybe we aren't going to experience the same sort of volatility, especially with like institutions coming in and trying to like maybe like hold stuff on their balance sheet, especially for like long term. It kind of dampens that volatility, keeps that growth curve going. Because what we're seeing like on chain analytics is that we aren't acting like we're in a bull market, but the price is still at what 45,000 USD. And that could potentially, it's acting as if on chain that it is like a bottom of a cycle. So like we're in this like weird period, and it's very hard to say from a technical analysis standpoint. Like, okay, well, it's different to the times before because all we have is previous price action to be able to compare that to. But with new institutions stuff coming through, like how do we know where the cycle's going to go? Which kind of leads me on to the next question actually. And again, this does link into the inflation thing. Do you think what we're about to see from Joe Biden and his executive order, is that going to be something that you think will affect cryptocurrency? And what are you looking for from this?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a tough one. We don't know what they're going to do. Also, like, are they going to go heavy and regulate it into oblivion? I don't think that they're dumb enough to do that. I mean, if you see what's going on with Russia, like Russia have literally just like regulated it in a way that totally legalizes it. Do they want to fall behind to Russia? Probably not. Do they want to fall behind to Canada? I mean, Canada's got a spot ETF, Bitcoin
Yeah.
spot ETF. So, and then also Europe as well. Europe is, Portugal, they're everybody's innovating. I just don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. I'm always on the side of you can't ban Bitcoin, right? Like it's decentralized, and if it gets banned in one jurisdiction, it will thrive in another. It's complicated because it's impossible to predict, right? But what I will say is, no matter what the US decides to do, there will always be a use case for Bitcoin, and other countries will adopt, right? So like the same way, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but a lot of people tend to come to crypto as like their last chance or like a last opportunity to really make money and make their career or whatever it is. And so the same thing will happen with countries. So El Salvador adopts Bitcoin as legal tender because like the economy was in dire straits. The president of El Salvador has now gone to Turkey to have a discussion with the president of Turkey, rumored to be about Bitcoin. Turkey's economy is not very good. So, and then Panama have introduced similar bills, by the way, to do with legalizing Bitcoin, making it legal tender. And so despite what happens with the US, huge continents, I'm not talking small countries, I'm talking huge continents, are going to do their own thing because they need to. I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Lebanon start having these kind of Bitcoin conversations. I mean, like the Lebanese pound has lost 90% of its value since 2019.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think actually more than 90% at this point. So, and then you also have like people banging on the doors of banks trying to get their money out. It's like incredible sights, truly. And so, despite what America does, it will be largely adopted in other parts of the world, and then America's going to be forced to innovate.
Yeah, it's again another weird one for America, isn't it? They're again like stuck in between a rock and a hard place, being the world reserve currency. Obviously, they can't really act first because they've got to see how things play out in other places. But if they take too long to act, people are going to go around them anyway, and they're going to. I had this conversation with someone the other day. Like, what is to stop like people just dropping the dollar? Let's say Russia. We know even like now Russia have sold a lot of their reserves. I think they've sold like 25. They've got 25 times less reserves in dollar now as what they had like, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. I don't know the exact statistic on that. But like, what's to stop Russia, China, India saying, why do we need the dollar anymore? And we can transact across borders for this price, this fast, instant settlement. Whatever crypto you want to pick, like they all do it within a certain amount of time, faster than you would settle the dollar, and probably cheaper. So I don't really understand what is stopping them from just dropping the dollar completely. What would you?
Yeah, I mean, go on. Sorry.
I was just going to say, what do you think like on that? It's like a bit of like a hypothesis, or not a hypothesis, just a theory from me, like just a thought process. I'd like your opinion on, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know necessarily what is stopping them. I don't know. I don't think much yet. Of course, like economic instability is stopping them, in the transition period and things like that, and understanding, like what are they going to be swapping it for? Bitcoin? Well, we need to understand really,
Sure.
What is Bitcoin? How long is it going to last? Is it going to last? They have to understand Bitcoin and its place in the world, obviously. But I mean, like I said, so Panama, for example, the US dollars are used in Panama. I was literally in Panama last month, actually 2 weeks ago, I was in Panama. And the US dollar is used, right? You use it everywhere. It cost me, just as a side point, which was wild, it cost me $2 to get an Uber, a 20-minute Uber. A 20-minute Uber was $2.
Nice.
So everything is in dollars, but like, why not switch it to Bitcoin? And so I think it will. I think more countries will follow. I think Bitcoin does need to become more stable in order for them to do that. I think we are a good few years away from Bitcoin stabilizing and finding that real market value. I'm happy that it will take time because it means there's still more money to be made. I get paid in Bitcoin. I take a lot of money in Bitcoin. So I was getting paid when Bitcoin was at 60K. So I've obviously hit a loss, but I'm very excited when we get to $500,000 Bitcoin. So yeah, I think it's just volatility right now, understanding a lot of people, the entire world, their eyes are on El Salvador, understanding how El Salvador is doing it, how they're raising money without the IMF, and what they've done with their Bitcoin bonds. So, like it's an experiment. People are watching, you can't just jump into these things. But it's certainly happening, and we're certainly going to be moving in that direction for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't think that we are, as a civilization, ready to be completely decentralized or to turn off like governments, anything like that. I don't think the
Yeah.
governments are right the way that they run things at the minute, but I also don't think, as general public, that we've got the ability to really do this. So, like, it is, as you said, like a bit of a testing ground. I can see Bitcoin coming through as like a reserve asset. That we can price things against. I don't really understand anymore why we price things against the dollar, specifically fiat currency. Well, how can you say that our bit, like everyone says, our Bitcoin's volatile, and if you're losing 7% in value on your world reserve currency, how can you price anything against that anyway? So
Right. One Bitcoin is always one Bitcoin. So
exactly
sounds pretty
that.
stable to me.
Exactly that. So, kind of in regards to that, what do you think we'll see in advancements of CBDCs this year? Do you think we're going to see
God.
one from the US? Are we going to see one from Europe, UK, China? Who's going to roll out first, and who's going to roll out, like, and how is that going to look for you?
Oh man, I hate CBDCs. Like I don't know if you know that. Do you know that or
No, I
not?
didn't know that. No,
You don't know
no,
that? Yeah,
no, no.
I really don't like CBDCs at all. So China, I actually just read today. Let me just go get it. I actually tweeted about it. So China have already rolled out the digital yuan,
Hmm.
and there. Oh, yeah, here we go. So China's digital yuan actually surpassed Visa in the number of transactions in one day. So
Wow.
that was on the opening of the Olympics. So they actually surpassed Visa, which is pretty wild. So it's certainly going to be adopted. So let me try like break this down the most simplest way. So I really don't like CBDCs. Main reason I don't like it is because it is a cryptocurrency, but it's highly centralized, and it means that the government can see every single transaction that you've made, but you can't see theirs. It means that money can literally be confiscated and money can be programmed, right? So if you
Hmm.
haven't had your third vaccine, then I'm really sorry, but you can't spend money on that piece of meat, because right now we're like literally living in a society where there's a war on freedom of speech, there's a war on masculinity, and there's a war on meat.
Hmm.
I just saw someone in the U.S. Senate literally the other day talking about how we need to eradicate meat and live a plant-based life. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that this money can be programmed, and if they don't like the way that you behave, they will program it so you can't do that. So yeah, so if you haven't had your third vaccine, then they might say to you, you can't buy that plane ticket. Or you can't shop it, you can't buy groceries from that store. And really, it's a punishment. And we already know this anyway, because in Canada, like it's about rewarding good behavior. They've already said that. People who have all the medicines will be rewarded, but with their freedom. So it's not about like it's not about science. It's not about being logical. It's about rewarding compliance.
Mm.
And so you would really be severely naive to not think that your money will be programmed to only be spent on certain things, and that's really important. And yeah, I mean, I don't need to go into any more detail on that. But what I will say is that we will all be bringing out CBDCs. So so the EU is already working on one.
Hmm.
The UK is working on one. Everybody will be bringing out their own CBDC. I know Nigeria is working on one. Russia is
Hmm.
working on one. I just hope that we are not. And I hope that it's not a transition whereby we have to use it. Sorry, we only accept CBDC money as
Yeah,
opposed to like bank money, like or fiat money.
yeah.
But then at the same time, if that does happen, we have better technology. We're
Mm.
very lucky that Bitcoin exists. We have better technology, and if I refuse to use a CBDC, which I will, by the way, refuse to use a CBDC because like you think inflation is bad, they can literally confiscate it. But no
Mm.
need to inflate money now. They can literally just take it away. And by the way, they'll be able to print money even easier.
Mm.
Of course, it'll be easier to print money and devalue your hard-earned money. So for me, if I go to a grocery shop and they say, sorry, you can't, you only have to use CBDCs, then I just won't shop there. And I think that like we will get to a point where we do transact in cryptos. It may not be Bitcoin.
Hmm.
It could be Litecoin. It could be Terra Luna's UST.
Mm.
Their actual decentralized stablecoin.
Yeah.
We're yet to see what it will be, but and then on top of that, it's also about like being aware of what's coming and what could come, and understanding the threat of big government and how power corrupts, and like adjusting accordingly, right? So like I'm moving to Miami, it's very crypto friendly. So if we do have CBDCs and they say for whatever reason, which I don't think will happen in Miami, but you can't shop here unless you pay CBDCs. I'll say that's fine, because my optician down the road, and this is true,
Mm.
takes Bitcoin.
Mm.
So and actually he took, what did I pay him? And I can't remember. I went to the opticians in Miami and I literally paid him in the crypto. Maybe it was I think it was Tether actually I paid him in. But that was amazing, right? So now we have actual people, real people, working people accepting crypto as payments. So move to a place where it's crypto friendly, vote with your feet.
Yeah.
That's sort of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that there's definitely some massive flaws for the general public in terms of like anonymity, specifically
Yeah.
anonymity for CBDCs. Also, as you're talking about, like that they can program it, and implement like negative interest rates, those sorts of things. We need sorting out and clarification on before we can do anything with CBDCs, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just also say, like, again, people don't take this seriously enough. So I think it was 2013, do you know about the Cypriot haircut?
No.
So in 2013, Cyprus's economy was in the trash.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, I do know.
so,
And they took all the money out of
yeah,
the banks. So,
they literally confiscated money from people who had over 100,000 euros in the bank account because they legally could do that. What do you mean? So that's an example of how money is confiscated. Let's go back to Lebanon. In Lebanon, because the value of the Lebanese pound plummeted, they started limiting how much money people were allowed to take out of the bank, out of their bank. And so that's why you have people banging on doors. So money is being confiscated. And so,
um,
of course, they're going to program it.
I know, and I mean, you see this already in the UK, for example. If I try and deposit from my bank, I use NatWest. If I try and deposit into a crypto exchange, I can't do it. And like they block my account, I ring them.
Really?
I've been completely blocked out for like 2 days before, and I just feel like it's just the next step of that anyway. The next step of control. But with that example specifically, when I'm trying to deposit, I feel like if I've earned my money and it's my money, if I want to go out and buy 10,000 milk bottle caps, I should be able to go and do that. That's my money. So if I want to deposit into a crypto exchange, like what's your authority to say, oh, you can't deposit here, but you can go and spin £1,000 on roulette or whatever if you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I know people like to say Bitcoin is apolitical, but everything is politics, right? So like it's really just a philosophy. It's a political philosophy, right? So it's like, do you think that you as an individual should be free to choose how much risk you wish to take? Or do you think that the government knows what's best for you and therefore should limit the things that you can do with your money? That's what it comes down to, right? So like they don't want you spending £10,000 in one day or whatever because they're just like, oh, that might be bad for him. We're here to help him. That's okay, and it might be, but like I'm sure you're probably smart enough to make that decision for yourself. Maybe some people aren't smart enough. But then some people aren't. They're just not. And so we have to like weigh out the pros and the cons, right? Like, does one have to take a test, an IQ test, or an academic test to have the freedom to choose what they wish to do with their money? Well, then that goes down really tricky routes, which we may not want to go down, because then like, who's creating the tests? How are the tests measured? You know, and so we have to draw a line somewhere. And for me, I'm a libertarian, so I say everybody should be free to choose how much risk they wish to take, and it's the government's responsibility to educate people and instill financial literacy from a young age. But then that goes down another rabbit hole, because they're not going to do that, because that then empowers people to be independent of government, and then government becomes small and loses control. So there you go.
Yeah, so we're basically, what I think that we would like to see is like risk tolerance warnings rather than blockages,
Exactly.
and education rather than restriction. So
Correct.
let's say we've already talked about new countries adopting cryptos, which is what I was going to say. So the next question is, which you kind of touched on a little bit, we didn't in general. Do you think we'll see a Bitcoin spot ETF this year in the US?
Oh, I don't know if we'll see it this year. I think we could. Okay, because of how many like applications have gone through. We've already seen the futures ETF. One was just declined the other day. I think that was Scaramucci's. I can't remember. Maybe it was somebody else's. No, it was somebody else's. Scaramucci's was declined
Was
before.
it Fidelity?
Yeah. I just think I wouldn't be surprised if we don't. The US right now is like trying to find its feet with crypto. So we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't be surprised either way. It's coming for sure. Like I think, Bitcoin is inevitable, but I think we have a bit of a fight first, particularly with the US.
Yeah, I think that there's also an internal fight going on in the US, like who's really in charge of regulating cryptocurrency to line their own pockets as much as anything. So I think until that's really sorted out, we probably won't see any too much of a step forward with that. So
For sure.
we're looking now into like Russia and Ukraine. What do you think the more macro like economic picture is doing towards like what effect is that having on cryptocurrency? Like Russia, Ukraine, the US, NATO, like EU, those sorts of things. What do you think is pushing that? Do you think that there's a further narrative, and do you think that it's going to affect cryptocurrency short, medium, or long term?
Okay, so that's a very packed question. I'll start with the most obvious answer, and that any form of geopolitical uncertainty is going to affect the market. It's going to make people scared. People will start selling their riskiest assets. Bitcoin is the riskiest asset right now. That will be sold. And we already saw that, right? Like we already saw the price take a hit when all of that was increasing. So that's my most obvious answer. The second point is that, but again, that will be short term, always short term. Bitcoin is an uncorrelated asset in the long term, not in the short term. The second point as well is that there are large mining farms, Bitcoin mining farms in Russia. And so we need to understand what happens there, right? So like, will miners want to be moving to Russia right now if there's an impending war? And then there was also not just the impending war, but we also didn't know how Russia felt towards crypto. They were thinking about banning it. That's obviously going to affect it, right? Like when people decide where to mine and set up, they have to consider how politically and economically free they are or they are going to be. So Kazakhstan, for example, was particularly, let's say, economically free, right, for a lot of miners to move to from China. You don't have those kind of capital controls, but are they politically free? Perhaps not. We saw major protests, so the power was shut off. That, of course, affected the network, and so they're going to have to, if they think that this is not sustainable, and then you have to consider how much money they lost, right, in terms of like in terms of mining. So if they weren't mining, then the network was, they were off on the network. So then they need to consider, like, how sustainable is this? How sustainable is it to be in a country which is not as politically and economically free as we would like it to be? That then means they'll have to move. So given there is this impending war, miners have to consider, do we leave Russia? Do we leave? That's going to be very expensive. Moving would also mean they're off on the network. The hash rate will, of course, drop. We saw that happen with China. Again, long term, it's always fine. I just think, like, right now there are teething problems. Where is the best place to set up? We don't really know because we're trying to figure out which countries are going to be free and open to it. And then this does lead me back to the US, because of course you do have that infrastructure bill, and the idea of what a broker is wasn't clear. And then because they didn't clarify that, miners are now considered brokers. Miners have to fill out all these tax forms and this and that, and it becomes truly impossible for them to even innovate. And so again, that's more uncertainty. Uncertainty means problems with price, right? Even if there's not genuine uncertainty, let's just like look at, like, I know you didn't ask about this, but like the energy FUD, for example, right? You and I both know, anybody who's well read on Bitcoin will understand that actually it's better for the environment, and actually the traditional financial system is worse for the environment for multiple reasons. But because there was uncertainty with regards to how the world would perceive it because of Elon Musk's comments and so on and so on, that affected the price. And so these are just teething problems. We have to learn and understand, what is Bitcoin? How does it work? You know, should we be afraid of it? Does it mean we'll truly lose control? And where's the best place to set up? And so while we figure those things out, yeah, the price will take a hit and it will be difficult.
Yeah, so it kind of adds to the like choppy range that we're sort of in at the minute, because everyone's just uncertain. Like, we have a lot of positivity coming out from the markets, but also there's, as you said, a lot of uncertainty. So this is kind of like chopping and changing with where we've gone, because the conversation's been pretty flowing. So what does the future of money look like to you?
That's a good question. I haven't really considered that so much. I have considered, okay, the future of money. CBDCs are coming for sure. I do think that inflation is going to continue, and the debasement of global currencies will continue. I do think that everything will go digital. And we're yet to understand, like, in what capacity. So it will definitely go digital in terms of like CBDCs. I think there's going to be a war between, it's not just money, it's because it's all about, everything is about freedom and individual rights. So there's going to be and they're growing tensions anyway with COVID and everything that's going on right now. there's like between freedom, taking personal responsibility, giving power to the government, and more in today's society, we're seeing the dark face of the government and the bad things that they do. And so they will want us to use their CBDC. We will want to use Bitcoin and more decentralized currencies. A great example of what I'm saying, which I think really portrays this really well, or like sort of encompasses this, is the whole situation in Canada with the truckers. So like, for those that don't know, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, he wants to mandate vaccines, right? If you're going to cross the border, if the truckers are going to, so the truckers are the people that basically support the supply chain, bringing food in and out of the country and other things. They're the people that put the food on the shelves, and a lot of them aren't vaccinated. It means that they can't do their job now with these new mandates, and so they're all just descending onto Ottawa. They've been there for days, and so on and so on. And so the whole thing with GoFundMe, I don't know how much money it was that was raised, but loads and loads of money was raised. People sent it through GoFundMe then blocked the funds, and now the truckers can't get their funds. So these people are protesting for their freedom. Money has been blocked. Now people are raising money using Bitcoin. And to me, that's just a perfect example, because when the establishment cracks down on you and takes away your freedom, and then also tries to brand you as like racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, Nazis, and all this stuff, that's what they've done. They've branded the truckers as that. You know, people are tired. People are tired, and people want their rights. People want their freedom. People want to have their voice heard. And so Bitcoin is a way for that. And I think that's how the future of money looks. There's this war between the two sides, because it's not about money. It's not about whose money is better. It's not about, is it my CBDC or is it my Bitcoin? It's about which one will empower us to be as free and as flourishing as possible, not your CBDC. And so that's how I think money is going to start to go. It's going to come from a very political and freedom kind of standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like, I feel that's a long-term picture. Like, short-term, like you're saying, we are going to have this almost war between like the establishment and the libertarians, and a big mix. And it's going to take a long time, but we see a similar narrative with Russia war, because although I'm no advocate for Russia or anything like that, but I mean, like, they got threatened by America to be cut out of the SWIFT system. So what do? They go and legalize Bitcoin, and then America come back and they're like, oh no, actually, we won't cut you out, because now you can actually go and use something that isn't the US dollar. So I feel like that's where the establishment, or I don't really know how to summarize the group of power, or just the US dollar. That's where the US dollar kind of loses control, because it's like, okay, well, if we try and take too much control, people just rebel. So they're in this, like, we're all in this weird phase of like intermediary, like, do we transition, do we not transition? The CBDC is going to come through, they're going to make things more effective for the end user who doesn't understand anything about crypto, by the way, like, because I think that is something that will be sold to the general public, just going to make your transactions faster, easier. No one's going to notice it. Someone's going to be like, yeah, why not? I'll jump on that. Like, let's just do that. So it's going to be like this, people who can almost see, and the people who just can't see or don't want to see. And then it's just going to be this weird transition period. And I would like to see an intermediary asset like Bitcoin sit in the middle as a reserve asset that we just price things against. But I think, again, like, I do think that's quite a long way away for me personally. Have you kept up to date with the XRP lawsuit, is my next question, and how do you think that affects cryptocurrency in general in the broader, like, sense of it in the US? Because what do the SEC do after that, depending on their success in that case?
I haven't kept up to date with the lawsuit. I did actually interview, I don't know if you saw it, when I was in Miami, interviewed Hester Pierce, who's the SEC commissioner, and it was pretty interesting. I mean, I know that Gary Gensler has said that he basically sees everything as a security. I do believe most things are a security other than Bitcoin, because at the end of the day, if you give me money and I build something, and if you give me money and I give you something for it, and I build something, and then that's something, and you get more money back, and is basically the definition of a security. I know I said that in a really confusing way. But yeah, if I build something for you, you give me money comes back to you, right? Like, it's going to be a security, and is kind of what she was saying to me. And so something like Solana, like, it's a security, it's centralized. VCs funded it. VCs were literally plowing capital into it.
Hmm.
They got their little token coin for it. Coin goes up in value. That's a security. Most of the crypto industry is like that. Ethereum is going to be a little bit different because we really need to understand, like, because it was an ICO, right?
Hmm.
But we need to understand, like, how decentralized is it?
Mm.
I think, I don't know, man. I think like a lot of these cryptocurrencies are going to be called securities, except for Bitcoin. Um,
I feel like the
I think
main
that's the future
reason
of it.
they can't say that Bitcoin is a security is because obviously the decentralization now, but they also don't know who really created it. Like if you could find Satoshi
Yeah.
Nakamoto, I feel like there's definitely an argument to say just the same way with any crypto if we're using that. If we're
No, I
using,
disagree.
do you not? Why do you think that?
Nobody pledged money.
Well,
Nobody pledged money to build anything,
they
and
still raise
nobody was
capital,
given anything.
but like miners mine Bitcoin off the assumption that they're gonna where they maintain the network and they create a profit from that. So they're securing a network and they're surely being paid to do that and like
It's
owning
not the
a part
same
of the
though.
network.
It's just not the same. It's completely different to a direct, like, VC gives me money, I build something and give you something back.
Hmm.
That something goes up in value. Like it's just not the same. So for me personally, like I don't think Bitcoin will be a security. I think the rest will.
Mm.
That's what Gary Gensler says.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So okay, going off on a different topic, what has since your crypto experience has started, what has shocked you the most, both about the crypto industry and the financial industry?
That's a good question. I'll start with the financial industry. Like I said, most of my education really came from crypto first, right?
Hmm.
And so it would just be like inflation and how messed
Mm.
up everything is.
Mm.
Um, it would be inflation really, and how like I was trying to figure out whether it was like destruction by design or whether it's just like a bunch of dumb people thinking that they're smart and like just messing stuff up.
Yeah.
So it'd be how broken the system is really. Like I didn't really understand inflation, but of course now I do, and the importance of financial literacy. And then what was the first part of the question?
What's been your biggest shock with crypto and the financial industry?
The biggest shock with crypto. I don't really have a big shock to be honest.
Mm.
I think like I mean, my biggest like awakening is the fact that like I think governments are bad.
Mm.
Like you know, I think big government is dangerous. Um, I believe in personal responsibility, and I believe that like everybody should be empowered to do amazing things in this world, right? Um, and so all of that, for me, that's very crypto related. And so like all of that is a realization in and of itself. And I
Hmm.
think I was already on that path. That's why I went into crypto. But crypto definitely brought that out in me more.
Yeah, I've got to say that I'm in exactly the same boat as you. I didn't really know anything about the financial industry until I got involved in crypto in a financial sense. I learned about crypto for the technology in the first place, and then like the finance came as a secondary aspect. And I had no idea the way that money was created. That I didn't even know we
Yeah.
weren't backed by gold anymore until I looked into it, and I was like, "This is literally made up money, and we're just trying now as the people to make our own made up money, and the government don't like it." Is essentially what's happening. So that blew my
Basically.
mind. That was my biggest shock, basically. So we've touched a tiny bit on this. We've got about 5 minutes left. But what do you think about the future of NFTs?
Oh, I've been talking about NFTs a lot recently. I think like okay, so I think it's a bubble right now
Hmm.
in the capacity that we're seeing it go mainstream.
Sure.
In terms of giving something a digital identity and authenticating it on the blockchain, that's very powerful. You know, whether it's like authenticating what number of a limited supply it is, you know, its history. Um, I think like Rolexes and, you know, designer things like luxury items and things like that. I think that has a huge use case for it, but I
Hmm.
don't think that's really what we see right now. I think like in-game assets is also really important, but like I was saying this on my show actually yesterday, talking about NFTs, and I was sort of saying like I don't see a place for me for NFTs right now because like it's very much for like okay, so I've never been into art, I've never been into collectibles at all. I'm just not. And so I don't really find value in like bored apes. Like
Sure.
I don't trade, so I'm not going to be flipping. Um, I just don't have the time or mental capacity right? I prefer to put my time and energy into other things. So like I don't do that. So I'm not gonna be trading. I'm not gonna be flipping. I don't collect, and I don't play games. So I understand the value of them for those who do like to collect, for those who do want to trade, for those who do play games, because it's amazing, right? Like you actually own your in-game items. I'm all for it. Given the metaverse is coming, like I support it. But at this stage, I don't feel I have a use case for it.
Sure.
I I have like some designer stuff, right? Like I have like a Louis Vuitton handbag, which I love. Okay, it's like the only designer thing that I have. I can understand authenticating that and putting it on the blockchain. I get it.
Yeah.
My brother has a Rolex watch, and I remember he was selling it to somebody. I can't remember why, but he didn't want to buy one from Dubai because if it goes from Dubai, even though it's the same watch, it loses value compared to buying it from the EU.
Okay.
I can't remember. There's all these different things. So being able to like track its history is really important.
Sure. Okay. So
But I'm not that.
there's just no market for you personally at the minute, but you do see the value of it in the future. Sure.
Perfectly said. Thank you.
That's a great answer. And I've got two final questions. We'll go with this one first. So we just mentioned the metaverse slightly there. What is your interpretation of the metaverse? Have we found it yet, or what are we looking for?
A good friend of mine always says that I met this guy in Miami, and he said to me, the metaverse is the seamless integration of the virtual world and the real world. I think it's a beautiful way to, yeah, it's good. It's a great way to do it because like the metaverse isn't you're putting on a headset. It's actually not. I think the metaverse is virtual reality and augmented reality. People forget that. So augmented reality is when you're living in the real world and you're seeing like pop-ups and things like that. And I think like particularly in Miami, like there will be buildings which are going to be tokenized. Like I'm already speaking with companies that are tokenizing these buildings, and they're not NFTs. They're making them they're security tokens. So you can own a share in commercial real estate. And I think like if you put on some kind of headset or whatever, you will then be able to like drive in an Uber, and you'll see like the price of like you'll see them all tokenized on buildings. Like for example, this mirror behind me, right? If you put on a headset, you could potentially see it broken down, and it wouldn't be an NFT. It'd be a security token, right? Because NFTs can't be fractionalized. When they're fractionalized, they're security tokens, from what I understand. I don't know why that is. So like you would put on a headset and see all the different security tokens and be able to just trade it from your phone if you want to take a share of that. Or maybe if I turn my book into an NFT, you could potentially, well, I guess it would be a security token. But if you wanted to buy my book as an NFT, then you could just buy it as an NFT. So I think everything's going to be both the virtual reality and the augmented reality.
Yeah, it's a strange concept to think of now, because for me personally the possibilities are just endless about what could happen and how that could like shape our future. And then this is really off topic compared to everything we've talked about, but I just think it's a good question to ask because I try and ask everybody this. When you're trying to find information for cryptocurrency, what is your best resource and how do you find it?
Such a funny question. People probably won't be able to relate to my answer, but because I produce educational content on crypto, right? So like YouTube, obviously, but I learn by like working with my colleagues. So like I'll be working with my colleagues and like they'll send me some information and then I'm like, okay, cool, I'll write a script on it, and then I'm writing a script, but I'm learning as I'm writing a script. So it's because I work in it and I do it every day. But for people looking to learn more about it, I would say number one, check out Exodus's YouTube channel. I work with them; they're amazing, and we always like put out really great content, whether it's news or educational videos about different assets. And there's a weekly news show. I have a lot of people on my podcast that I invite on, and I find that really educational. I remember when I didn't fully understand the whole Bitcoin mining thing, I interviewed Ari Paul on my podcast, and then I understood it. So working in the space, you get to ask a lot of questions and you learn more. So yeah, YouTube and working in this space.
Okay, that's brilliant. So Layah, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find your? I'll have your links in the description below, but where's the best place for people to find your content?
Yeah, sure. As you can see, my book is behind me, which is Undressing Bitcoin. So it's a beginner's guide to Bitcoin. And it's really fun, really informal, and rather inflammatory. So don't read it if you're easily offended. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I'm on YouTube. I have my podcast on YouTube, so just check it out there. It's just Layah, Heilpern everywhere.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.